by now I've made quite a few different animations, so I figured today I'd finally show how I do it. First is the idea. Now I can't really tell you how to get an idea, but when it comes to the story, you really don't need to have the whole animation planned. I usually don't. Of course, it's better to have a full idea, but I find if I just have the start, the end, and then some major parts in between, it's usually enough to start working on it. Now, if your story is more complicated or longer, you could always make a storyboard. I haven't done this too much, but for longer stories, it's useful. If you do a storyboard, I think it's important to remember to not go crazy with it if you don't have to. Only really do as much detail as you need to show the story or the frames. I've seen some storyboards which are pretty much entirely animated out in a sketchy version. I think that's going a bit too far. Just do the important scenes or any scenes you think you might have a bit of trouble with. I think that's good enough. At least for me it is. After that, I then start working on the first scene. For this, I need to make all the props, items, and really anything else that I think I might need. Here I'm working on the interior and exterior for a restaurant. When making an environment, I usually draw a picture of it before. Here's the picture I did for this scene. I find coming up with ideas and the right proportions and sizes of things is kind of hard to do in Blender, so just drawing it beforehand is helpful. When I'm drawing it, I can just focus on the ideas and how I want everything to look and the general feel of things, and then in Blender I can just focus on making the model as close to the picture as possible. I find this works the best for me. Once everything for that's done, I then add the characters I need, which I have an entire file for, just for different characters that I can reuse. For this project, I didn't need to make any more, just some hats for the blobbers, and that's about it. Though when I do need to make characters, it can take quite a while, sometimes even more than the environment. Making and rigging characters is complicated, and I don't really want to go into too much detail on it in this video, but just try to focus on making your rigs stable and reusable. Sometimes I just want to do the bare minimum to get the scene done, and sometimes that's fine, but if you're going to be using that character again, it's a good idea to make them well. Make sure you can move them all sorts of different ways, and that they're easily changeable for different scenes. Though it may take a long time to make a rig, it definitely saves a lot of time when you can just reuse them. Another thing that saves a lot of time is to reuse animations. Again, this is something that is a bit complicated, so I can't go into too much detail in this video, but by using the non-linear animation tab, you can store animations, then reuse them. So you could make a single walk cycle, then just have it loop instead of having to animate every single footstep, since that would get a bit crazy. You can also mix different animations together, like having a walking animation with a head turning animation. It's a very helpful tool that I don't even understand fully, but once I do, I think I might make a video in the future going into a lot more detail about it, as it's something that is pretty important for animation. Also, with certain animations, it's really important to be able to hear the sound of music to properly animate it. To do this, just open the video sequencer, then drag in the audio. Now you can hear the audio when you play the animation. This is quite helpful for music videos. Now, each video is different, of course, so there will always be different things you'll have to do. Sometimes I have to add effects, 2D animations, simulations, and sometimes the scene is just tricky to get right, so you have to be creative at times. But for the most part, if you just learn more on everything I've shown in this video, you should be able to make most of any animation idea you have. Now for the rendering. Before rendering, you should know about the compositor. It's basically a way of editing every picture that gets rendered. So you can change the brightness, color, blurring, add a light. You can also add a fog by enabling the mist option here. And of course, there's a lot more you can do with it. I've seen some crazy things people have done with just the compositor. But if this is your first time making animation, you probably shouldn't worry about it too much. Other than that, just fiddle around with the exporting options and the output properties. Choose where your pictures go, the file format. I think the PNG format is the best. Also, you can turn the look and render properties to medium or medium high, as it tends to look a bit better this way. Also, denoise can be a very useful tool, as it removes this grain effect that happens if the image is not rendered enough. It can really save a lot of time. Once all the images are rendered, it's time to edit the video. The software I like the most is DaVinci Resolve. I've tried quite a few different video editors, but I think this is the best one, at least for me. First, what I do is I import all the images, then try to get the timing right. Sometimes I need to slow things down or speed them up. I also add in transitions or any other effect that's easier to do in a video editor than in Blender. Then of course there's the sound and music. I make all my music, so that's another thing I have to do. But for the sound effects, most of the time I can just get them from places. If it's a very specific sound, I can also make them myself, though most of the time I don't need to do that. This is also the time when I usually realize there's a problem with the animation and then have to go back and reanimate it, which is a bit frustrating. Always make sure to check your scene many times before rendering them. The last thing you want is to render something for days, only to realize you now have to render it again. Also make sure to make backups of your scene, in case you make some change that you can't undo. Anyways, after I get the video length, timing, and music and sound adjusted and balanced correctly, I then move on to the rendering. I find using this QuickTime format works for me, and I've also heard that using the codec H.265 is better, but I haven't really noticed a difference, so I don't always do that. From there, I leave everything the same, and then it's about done. Just uploading to YouTube and adding the title and stuff like that. After that, it's done. Now, of course, there's a lot more to animating that I probably didn't go into. Making these always takes a really long time, usually months or more. But this is the best I could do to sum everything up in a video that doesn't take 10 hours.